All right, so let's go through an example of building a web page, and then we're going to focus on local storage. It's something we're going to be using. So I already kind of created these files. There's nothing in them. So I have an index.html, which will be my web page, script.js if I want to add any logic. That's what JavaScript is used for. And if I want to add any styling, that is what our CSS is used for. All right, so my index.html, I'm going to create just a simple web page. So for now, I'm going to do it all by, so I usually have my, I'll use my HTML base. I usually use my predefined template, but let's just do it from scratch just to go through that. So to start an HTML document, we want to start with the HTML elements. So add that. Again, we need an opening tag and a closing tag. So make sure you always have a closing tag for your opening tag. Some tags can be self-closing. We'll maybe see an example of that, but just understand how tags work. So we're going to create a head section. Always get to give your page a title. So let's say this will be called Happy Friday page. All right, so that's our title for our page. Next, we're going to create our body section. So our body section is what actually goes on the web page itself. The title is what's shown like in the title bar or your tab of your browser. But all the content that a user reads or views or interacts with is going to be in the body of your HTML document. So here we can, add elements as we desire. Textual elements, we have headers saying Happy Friday. It's November 5th. Then we could also add, whatever else we want. Today is going to be assessment 3. All right, so just some textual content via paragraph tags. That's usually where most of your text will go in. Headers, again, are just more for titles on your page. What else can we add? We could add images. So images are nice to add to your site. Again, you don't want to just have all text. It's kind of boring to look at. Images can kind of spice up your web page. So let's add an image. So for an image, let me call on someone out there. James Kelsey. How do I specify what image I want to show on my web page here? I think you're muted.
You're going to put the SRC attribute on there.
Yep, SRC stands short form for source, and then we want to specify a source. So in this case, I need to find an image I want to show. Let's do it from the web. So again, you have two options. You can link to something that already exists on the web via a URL, or you can link to something that's local to your web page right here. So if I had an image here, I could put that image name, like whatever.png, whatever the name might be. But in this case, I don't have an image handy, but the web is filled with images. So let's find something here. Let's see. James, what's your favorite food?
Pizza.
Pizza. I love pizza. Are you deep dish, thin crust? Do you have a specialty like Neapolitan? Any particular type of pizza?
Deep dish is the jam, but I haven't found any deep dish here in South California.
Okay, so if you visit Chicago, sorry, this is a tangent. I do not like deep dish pizza. I'm going to put that up front. I like thin, greasy New York style pizza as my pizza to go for. However, if you visit Chicago and you are craving deep dish, I would highly recommend a local spot called Pequod's Pizza. That's Pequods. They are fantastic. So I normally don't like deep dish. I like their deep dish. The typical tourist traps here are Giordano's, Gino's East, Illuminati's. I mean, some people like them, so I'm not going to say, don't try them, but I do not like them. Anyway, this is a small tangent, but pizza is a important topic to discuss. So deep dish, pizza. Let's get a picture of that. So yeah, this is what Chicago style deep dish usually looks like. It's basically a pie with a bunch of cheese and sauce in it. Oh, Pequods. I was just talking about Pequods. This is what Pequods looks like. They actually they burn their crust, which sounds kind of weird, but it's really good actually. So I'm actually going to copy this image. Copy image. Or sorry, I want the composite.
The more you talk about food in Chicago, the more I think I need to come to Chicago.
Definitely visit. I think some people are visiting during Thanksgiving week if you are able to. I guess flights might be kind of expensive during Thanksgiving week, but all right. So I'm going to grab the URL. So I'm going to do copy image link, and then I'm going to use that in my web page here. All right. So kind of a long URL, but whatever. I can't control that. And then image tags, as I mentioned, are one example of tags that are self-closing. So for this, I could just add a closing tag right here. If I didn't want to, I could just add an image tag like this, and it should work. Oops.
Hey, Ankur, real quick, I have one quick question.
Sure.
So for one of the projects, I had like an extremely long URL that I copied, and I was like, oh, I can just use tiny URL, and like it didn't work. Is there any particular reason, or maybe I just messed it up? Like, I don't know.
So yeah, I would need to look more into it, but I believe tiny URL is for redirection. This is not like the source is not going to redirect for you. So tiny URL, actually, you go to that link, and tiny URL redirects you to where you're supposed to go to. So in that case, you're not linking to an image, you're linking to a URL that's going to redirect, and the image tag is not going to follow that redirection. If that makes sense.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that would be my guess. Again, I haven't tried this, but yeah, I don't think you can kind of link to a redirect URL for an image. All right, so let's see what our web page looks like. So I'm going to use live server. If you've not installed it, highly recommend it, but you can view this in many other ways. All right, that came up over here. All right, so we got a pizza picture, but it's super large actually. Not the best content-wise. So let's try to adjust that. So there's a couple ways we can adjust this picture. Again, it's huge. I don't know how large this file size is, but it's taking up more than my page width. We could add a height and width here. So if I did width equal, let's make it kind of reasonable, maybe 256 pixels. All right, there we go. So now much more reasonable, easier to view here. But we could also use CSS here. And since we want to learn about CSS, let's actually do this the CSS way. So I'm going to call on, let's see, who have I chatted with in some time? Brian Slusher. I feel like we haven't chatted recently. How can you help me get the CSS going here? How can I control the width of this image using CSS?
Oh, hell. That I'm going to have to go back for. Give me a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, last week was all a
That's all right. Yeah,
blur for me.
we can call on someone else if you need to look it up. Let's chat with. Oh, if you have an answer for us.
No, I do not. I am so sorry about that.
No apologies necessary. This is meant to be a learning experience. Let's talk with Tanya. Tanya, how's it going? Can you help me get my CSS going here?
Yeah, I think the first thing you should do is add a class to the image tag.
Okay, we're gonna add a class. Let's call it pizza class. Let's call it pizza. Okay, we added a class. Great. What do we want to do next?
Then you would go to the styles.css file,
Okay.
.pizza,
Okay. Why are we using .pizza?
because it's a class.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, Tanya is correct. So anytime we're targeting a class selector, we use a dot. If we're using an ID, we use hashtag. If we're using, if we're targeting a type of element, right? So if we look at my index, we want to target my H1s, then you just type the element name. So in this case, H1 will target every H1 on my page, not just a particular one. If I want to target a particular H1, I would need to use an ID or maybe a class, but it's going to understand how selectors are working. So yep, Tanya is correct. We want a dot because it's a class selector. All right, pizza. All right, what do we want to add here, Tanya?
You want to add the width
Width.
attribute.
Okay.
And maybe, what is it? 200 pixels? I'm not
Yeah, we
quite
can do
sure.
200 pixels. So remember, you want to add your attribute name, or I guess in this case, it's style name, colon, and then the value you want to give it. So in this case, 200 pixels is what we want. All right, I'm going to save that. Let's see if that did anything. So notice my image is large again. Why do you think that's happening?
You haven't linked the style sheet.
Absolutely, yep. Easy to forget, but we need to link. So we created the style, so the style exists, but our page has no idea that the style exists. So we need to link it. So the way we link it is in our head section, we will add a link, I believe. Relationship will be style sheet. I think there's a type also. I don't know if I need to use a CSS. Maybe I'm making that up. But then the main thing is we need a href, I believe. And then this will be styles.css. And link, I think, is a unique tag. You don't need a closing part of it. And I'm not sure if that would be an error or not, but I think we can get away with it. All right, let's see if that works. No, I screwed something up. Can someone help me out here? Did I do anything wrong here? So style sheets, styles.css, class is pizza. I think that looks right. Maybe the Googles. Anyone knows if I did anything wrong? Please let me know. Link CSS to HTML. Link tag. So we're using link tag rel style sheet href looks right. Anyone have any ideas? Okay.
Can you repeat the question, please? Or the
Oh yeah,
issue?
so I added my link here, but it doesn't seem like my pizza. Oh, there it goes. All right, maybe it's that type. Sorry, that was my bad. So you just want the relationship and the href. So it looks like it's working. Thanks so much, Tanya. We were able to link our style sheet, and now we're affecting this height. So if we, or this width. So if we wanted to change it, make sure it's actually doing something, let's make this, let's make it tiny. Let's make it 100 pixels. Notice updates. Again, I'm using live server, so this kind of refreshes automatically. If you aren't using live server, you might do a refresh your page to see the updated styles. Okay, cool. Got this nice pizza picture from Pequod's Pizza. All right, so that's an example of an image tag. Let's get to our main question, which was using local storage. So for local storage, we usually want to store user input. So let's allow the user to add input. So I'm going to add an HR. I like these elements. They kind of just divide up your page. That's a horizontal rule. Looks like a line that goes across your page like that. Let's have an input section. So let's say, have a paragraph. Let's say, input your favorite pizza toppings. All right, so the user can add some pizza toppings. Kind of just thinking ahead, I'm gonna display the toppings they add as a list. So I'm gonna have that as an unordered list. And that would be here. One thing, sorry, before we get too far into it, Tanya, can I kind of call on you again? Why did we add a class here?
You added a class because you wanted to alter the width of the image.
Yep. Can I ask you why did we go with class instead of ID? Was there a reason for that?
The reason why I went with class is because you could have multiple classes on the page with the same value, the same like pizza could be multiple times on the page, but
Gotcha.
IDs are very unique. So it has to be once on the page.
Yep, great answer, and that is totally correct. So in this case, we have one image, so we could have done ID. If we want to just affect this one image, but what if, like, yeah, as Tanya was saying, she might be thinking, what if we added more images here? So maybe class equals pizza. Let's find a couple more pizza pictures. In this case, we can just use the same class. So I'm going to find some pizza pictures. Does anyone have a favorite pizza spot that they know offhand?
Little Caesars.
Oh, I love Little Caesars.
Yes.
They're crazy bread. It's just butter and dough and cheese, but it's so good. It's probably terrible for you. I don't know how regional or national Little Caesars is. Is it everywhere? Anyone not heard of Little Caesars? All right, so let's grab a pizza. Let's grab this one down here. Grab the tiny image. All right, so we're just gonna add another image. And yeah, so now that we have this class, we can have a consistent look with our images. So pizza class, or class pizza, source will be what I just copied. And alt, so alt is good practice to have an alternate text. So if your image doesn't load, there's some description of what this image should be. Also, if you're thinking about, what's the word I'm looking for? People that might be visually impaired, there are tools that will go through the HTML source and kind of read out loud what the alt tag is saying. So again, it can be beneficial. So always good practice to have an alt tag saying what the image should be. Little Caesars, not good spelling. Okay, so we have our alt tag. This will be self-closing. Yeah, so we use a class pizza again. So if we go here, notice it's the same size. It's really consistent. And that's because we're using the same class. And so, yeah, Tanya's suggestion was great. We're able to add multiple images that will have the same width. Okay, let's go with favorite pizza toppings. So we need an input here. So input is one of many fields where you could actually grab user input. So we'll give this a placeholder. That's just the text that kind of shows them toppings. And I think this is self-closing. All right, let's see what that looks like. All right, notice we got an input field here, so we type into it. Again, it doesn't do anything right now. We probably want a button with it, so let's add a button, because usually those go well together. So we button, this will say add, and then, okay, so that should be kind of what I want. Any questions about what we've added so far? Again, this is a quote unquote dumb web page, as in we're just showing content. We're not actually doing anything with it. There was a hand raised there. I didn't see who it was, but
Can you show us like kind of like nested CSS or like double tag CSS where you're looking for something that is a like paragraph that is a certain class or you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So I'll try to incorporate that. Thank you for that question. So I'm going to create some divs. Now you might be like, you're just doing this for the example. Not fully. I actually add divs. I add divs all the time just to kind of create more blocks that I can target in the future. Again, the users are going to see like these added divs that I'm adding in right here. Let me add that div here. Tabbing is a little weird. All right, so this is one div just to kind of section that out, and then I'm going to create another div maybe after my HR. So div. Also, we've mentioned this before, tabbing doesn't matter for HTML to actually work, but always good to have good formatted code. So I want to make sure my tabbing is consistent. All right, so we have two divs now. We'll try to use that for our CSS to target something. Let's actually do that right now since the question was asked. So the question is, how do you target something that's nested? So looking at what I've had so far, I don't have too much to show for, but I have two paragraphs, right? I have this paragraph that says today is going to be assessment 3. The second paragraph that I have on my page is input your favorite pizza toppings. So let's actually try to test this out. What if I do class equals fancy text? I don't know how fancy it's going to be, but hopefully we can make it a little fancy. So I'm going to add a class selector for fancy text. Let's add some styling to it. So let's say the color, let's make that something cool. I don't know what a cool color would be. Some color options. Let's go with steel blue. That sounds kind of cool. All right, steel blue would be the text. Hopefully that's not too light. We can also change the fonts. So let's say font family for our paragraphs will be, let's go with cursive. I don't know how bad that'll look, but that's fancy, right? Cursive's kind of fancy. And then let's make this font a little larger. So do font size. Again, a lot of these properties, I haven't necessarily memorized them. I've used them enough that I know they exist, but if you forget, look up documentation. Again, there's hundreds of properties, so don't worry if you kind of don't remember all of them. Just know that most normal things you want to do with styling there should be a property for it. So let's go with large. Okay, that's our fancy test. Let's see what it looks like. All right, that's readable. That's a cool font actually. It's not what I thought cursive would be like, but yeah, I like it. I like the look of it. So the question that was asked was, how do we target something that's nested? In this case, we're targeting all paragraphs. What if I only want to target this paragraph and not this paragraph? Well, there's a couple ways we could do it. We could give them unique IDs, right? We could do something like, if I wanted to do it one way, I could say, give this an ID and say ID equals, let's call it toppings prompts. I don't know, I'm bad with naming. So if we have an ID here, well, easy way would be we could simply target the ID. So I could say toppings prompts, right? And that lets me target just toppings prompts. Oops, I did not switch to a hashtag. So again, hashtags are for IDs. Let's see how it looks. All right, notice I was able to target only this paragraph by ID because it's unique. IDs should be unique identifiers. But that's one way to do it. What if I, wanted to do this more? So let's say, I have another div. Let's add another div down here, and this will be another paragraph. Let's say, cheese is yummy. All right, let's say I also wanted to make that style for this paragraph. So what I said is I want this to also have the same style. Well, we go back to classes, right? So I could do something like add a class back in and have a different class. Well, let's try to target this a different way. So let's say I want to target only this paragraph, or what I want. I want to target both these paragraphs without using ID, or maybe not even using class. So again, there's multiple ways to do it. Usually I would use a class in this case. Just to be clear, I would go with class, apply 2 classes for this, and not apply that class to here. That'd be my preferred way to do it. All right, but let's just try to see what CSS can do for us. Obviously, I don't have that class anymore. That's text. All right, so we're able to target these 2 via a class. What if I didn't want to do that? Well, we do have some options here. So we can do something like for every div, what if divs have a paragraph underneath it? They should take on this style. That's still going to target each one of these paragraphs because this paragraph is nested within this div. What if I wanted to avoid this? It gets a little complicated. I think I need to Google this. So, and child CSS. So this is a little more advanced CSS. So it looks like you do 2 every 4th. How about CSS avoid?
The first child selector. That's what you mean.
What was that? Not first child?
You should be able to use first child selector.
Okay, so we could do something like, again, this is probably more advanced than you will ever need to do. We could do a not first child. All right, clearly I need to look this up. Not first child selector. Stack Overflow. Okay, so we want to do not first child and colon. Okay, so I want to do body not first child. All right, so this is kind of hacky, but trying to get this to work. So basically I'm saying ignore the first child on my page for the body. So the body has children elements. So in this case, let's look at our code. We have body. This is the first child for the body element. The second child is this HR. Third is this div. Fourth is this div here. So this is hacky. So I'm just trying to demonstrate what we're trying to get for. This is one way where we can target something. So we're ignoring the first child, but then every paragraph within that div, we want to take this style. So if I save that, that broke because that happens. Body, not first child.
I think you need the modifier on your paragraph. So I think you pull the paragraph over to the left and then you modify off of paragraph. So body space P colon not first child.
So body P would be any paragraph that comes as a child of the body. So I want to target these divs. So I want to ignore this div.
Oh, then.
All right, let me just go with a different example. I think this is a poor choice. Let's nest some more stuff so we can target stuff. So let's do a class here. We'll do it this way. So class will be header, and these will be sections. Sorry for the switch around. I didn't have a good example that I was going down with. All right, so these divs are going to be our subsections, and then we have a header section. So using this is probably a better example. We want to, as I said, I want this paragraph to have some sort of styling and this paragraph, but not this paragraph. Now, obviously, as I said, I could achieve that with using class. What if they all had the same class though? Oops, sorry. All right, right now they all have the same class. So let me revert this because I screwed it up. We want fancy text. All right. So now, again, every paragraph is getting the same thing because they all have the same class types. Now, if you guys kind of ignore the last 5 minutes, what if I want to apply something different to these two paragraphs, but not this one? Well, these two divs have the same parent class for their divs. So let's say I want to make this red instead of blue, right? I could, again, I know I'm kind of jumping around examples here. I could add another class here saying red text and then make that text red. That's one way to do it. Another way, let's say I just want to specifically ignore the first paragraph. This is where we could change CSS selectors. So we have fancy text. We could do something like if section, which is a class, if that has something fancy text, make that red. And we'll talk about what this is doing because definitely it's kind of wonky. So if I did this correctly, this is saying find something that has a class of section. Once you find it, look for a descendant that has a class of fancy text. So this selector is more specific. So remember, they can have different specificities. It's going to target this and then find something that has a class of fancy text. Now, I think I call that section, so I need that. Let's make that singular class section. All right, so just understand that all three of these paragraphs have fancy text as their class. But I added another selector that's more specific, so it's going to get preferential treatment. That's saying, hey, find something that has the section, and then another descendant that has the class of fancy text. If I did this correctly, this should have, these two should be red now instead of blue. So look at that, notice we got red. So some concepts that we talked about, specificity. If you guys remember, if I can dig up my old lecture, let me see if I can find that quickly. Sorry, I don't have my lectures quite handy, but I will get that in a second. Lectures, presentations. What we talk about? This was CSS and JavaScript or HTML. Okay, let me throw this up here just for reference. All right, so we had this, we talked about CSS specificity, so I just want to review that because it's good to know about. All right, went through example. I don't want to go through this whole thing. CSS. Where's that math equation? Ah, right here. So we talked about CSS specificity. So basically, there's like a pseudo equation that you kind of go through based on what type of selector you're using. So if you're using ID selector, that is more specific, so that gets a higher weighting. So in this case, we've chained two class selectors together. So if you looked at, I want to make sure I'm not lying to you guys. So let me test something out quickly. What if I swap the order of these? Will that break my code? No, that's still fine. Okay, so in this case, we've basically combined two class selectors. So that's going to be more specific than just a single class selector. So our example was, if you have some class, you change some things together, and you kind of just add up how specific they are, and that's the one that gets the priority. If there's a tie, then the last definition will get it. So in this case, if we had only a class here that was, let's say, red text, right? So we have red text and fancy text. And then if I go down here and say I want these to be red text, well, we're not going to get this to work as we want it because of the ordering of my CSS. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, I want this to be both fancy text and red text. Well, if I go to my page, notice it's back to blue. Why is that back to blue? Well, it's because we have a tie in specificity. This is one class selector, this is another. They're both equal in terms of their weighting, how specific they are. So if there's a tie, the last definition that gets kind of loaded is the one that gets priorities. In this case, this color overrides this color. But if I swap these, we get, this is the last one, so that should take precedence in the case where there's a tie between these two styles. So I go back here, notice we get back to red. Michael, I think you're the one that asked about nested selectors. Is that kind of answer, or did I kind of lose you guys with the whole?
That got it there. That was good. Thank you.
Okay, so again, just also know you could chain selectors. So in this case, if I had, let's see, I could do pizza, what am I doing? Fancy So if you do something like this, again, you might see syntax like this. This means something that has both of these classes. This is different than this. Can someone tell me the difference between fancy text.redtext and fancy text space.redtext?
One is fancy text. That's the parent parent, and then the red text is a child.
Yep, Tanya got it correct. So a space means you're looking for a child, a direct child. There's also angle bracket means any ancestors, like child, grandchild, great-great-grandchild. Again, if you want to review, go back to our lecture. We talked about these. So again, space means all descendant. Oh, sorry, I mixed that up. So I'm glad we reviewed it. Space means any descendant. Arrow means immediate child. So I flipped those. Apologies there. So just know that you can kind of combine selectors that way to specify what you want to target. So again, space means any descendant. Arrow means immediate child. But yes, if you don't have a space, that means you're actually targeting the same object that has both of these classes attached. All right. Any questions on CSS? Okay, let's get to local storage because I know that was one question I was asked. Let's actually get this input going here. So I have an input here. I'm going to add some IDs because I know I want to do something with these. So let's say ID will be submit topping. Input, we probably need an ID for that. Input topping. And then this list will need, let's call it list output toppings. Hopefully I remember all those names. All right, basically the flow here is the user is going to enter something into the input. They'll hit the button. The button should trigger something where we are able to populate our list. So let's get JavaScript into the equation. Again, this is how we actually add logic to make our web page smarter, allow our users to have interaction. So I'm going to go to my script file. I'm going to do window.onload. It's usually a good place to kind of initialize things. Let's remove that arrow function. And this, I want to set up an event listener. So to do that, I want to get my elements. First, I'm going to do let button add equals documents.get element by ID. And I named my button dash add topping. I probably didn't name it that. I have really bad short-term memory. Submit topping. Let's call it add topping. Button add topping. All right, so because of that, I'm targeting that. I'm going to do button add topping add event listener. When they click the button, I want to do something. So I'm going to say on add topping as my events handler. So I'm going to create a function and say const on add topping. Let's make that a fat arrow function just because we're going to use them often. I want to do something in here. So let's just do an alert just to test it out. So I'm going to do alert. Now let's do console. Console.log button was clicked. Let me ask someone out there. So I love chatting with you guys. Who's out there? Who's out there? Let's go with Sean Furlong. Can I ask you a question? What's the difference between doing this and not doing that? So should I add parentheses here or should I do option 2, no parentheses? And if so, why would I go that route? So which line is correct? Line 5, line 6, are they both correct?
So when you add the parentheses, you're calling a method, or a built-in function. So with this, you're going to be adding that. You would add that parentheses.
So you're saying line 5 is the correct way?
Yes, because that's a function, and we want to call that function.
Yeah, so good guess there, but actually the correct answer is line 6. But again, definitely glad we're going over this. So Sean is correct. When you add the parentheses, that means you're calling the function. But the question is, do we want to call the function right now? And the answer is no. So right now when we're adding the event listener, like the user hasn't clicked anything, right? So we don't want to, handle we don't want to like fire that event handler right now. So it's going to be fired right now because we're calling it with parentheses. So it's going to actually invoke this function, and console log will happen right away on window load. We don't want to do that. What we actually want to do is we want the event listener to call this function. So whatever logic is being done here, as in where's handling the events and handling the events, that should look for a click event, and when that recognizes a click event for this button, it should call this function for us. So we're telling it which function to call. We're not calling the function right now. So in this case, we want to omit the parentheses. Again, easy mistake to make. I've made it before, especially in React. Just know that you don't want to call the function right away if it's an event handler. You want the event to call this function.
Okay, so just for my understanding, if those parentheses were there, the moment we loaded up the function, it would already just execute it.
Yep. And in addition to that, the click will no longer be able to call that because it's not a function reference. So yep. So okay, we add event listener, and then we want to see if the button's clicked. So I'm going to go to my webpage. Let's add my favorite topping. I actually like cheese pizza, but if I were going with toppings, I'd go with green olives. I know that's a love-hate relationship. All right, click add. Let me bring up my property inspector. We have console here. I don't care what's new. All right, so hopefully we should see in our console that I clicked something. All right, we're not grabbing the input yet, but let me click this. Nothing's happening. Luke, can you help me out here? Can you maybe guess why nothing's happening? I should see button was clicked right here. I'm not.
Can you go back to your JavaScript?
Sure. So I should see this in my console, but I am not. So I'll give you a hint. My JavaScript code is correct.
I'm not sure.
Okay, fair enough. Mary Ann, can you maybe help us out here? Can you maybe guess why I clicked this button? I coded it up, which I think is correct. Nothing's coming out.
I'm not sure either, but do we need to do something in HTML?
Yep. Yeah, so similar to CSS, we need to link our JavaScript to our HTML file, right? So I've coded it up. Again, I'm just going to tell you, hopefully, again, I need to test it, but I'm going to tell you, I think my code's correct, but my HTML page has no idea of that logic existing because we've not told it, hey, we have this script file that you can, borrow logic from. So we're going to do the script tag. I think this is src, not href. And we want to do script.js and close that script. All right, so now if I did this correctly, this is going to kind of import all that logic so that we can grab this button and then add an event listener to it.
Andre, you got to defer it if you're going to put it up there.
Yes, thank you. Was that Guillermo?
Yes.
Guillermo, can you tell me more about this defer? And what if I didn't have that defer in there?
If you don't have the defer, you could just put it right at the bottom of your body.
Okay. Well, what if I left off this defer? Can you tell me what might go wrong in this example here?
It's going to try to load like the behavior of the web page right at the beginning.
Yeah. So sometimes, sometimes you get away with this if you forget the defer or just don't want it. Sometimes that will work. In this case, I believe my code's going to work because I'm waiting for onload. Onload will fire when the window completes on loading, not when the document, when my JavaScript loads. So in this case, this function will only happen when the document loads, so I should be fine. But if I'm doing something like this out here, let's just do this for example. Let's say I want to grab my button out here, and then on the load, I'll add event listener, right? Try to do it this way without the defer keyword. Where did it go? Too many windows. If I did not have the defer, this is not going to work. So notice I get an error. Cannot read property of null. Just to save us some debugging trouble, null is what button add got set to, because document by get element ID, that relies on the document to have loaded this item right down here. However, if I load my script right here and I don't defer, it's going to do this right away. When this script loads, it's going to say, all right, I'm going to grab the button from the document, but the document hasn't added the button yet. So that's why defer, if I change this to defer, it should work. So if I defer here, now it's going to say, wait for the document to load, and only then execute the script here. So if I do this, I should hopefully
Get some quotes in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
yes, defer should not go in there. Defer should go out here. Thank you. So refresh, notice my error went away. And now if I actually click this, notice we get buttons clicked as many times as I click it. So again, we need to link our JavaScript to our HTML file. And then also don't forget that defer. It's just good practice to have that in there.
I have a question for you, Anchor. Sorry. What is the difference between defer and async defer?
Yeah, so I will answer this by saying probably a Google response will give a better response. But basically, async means do this separately, as in it can continue loading your HTML file and also load your script kind of in parallel. I think that's what async's doing. Async defer is kind of redundant in that it's saying do this later, and then also do it asynchronously. So it's, again, if you read up on this, it says you don't need both. You need one or the other. So async will, like, I think one example would be if my script file had a lot in it, like let's say it had a lot of logic that's executing, it took a lot of time. I don't want to hold up the loading of my web page while my, like, you know, my million for loops are running in my script file, for example. So in that case, async will say, all right, start loading this, but also load the document kind of in parallel. If you don't have the async, it's going to wait for this script file to fully run. And if I have like a for loop that's going to take like 10 seconds to run, well, it's not going to load my document until the script loads. But yes, you don't need defer and async together, because defer says wait for your document to load and then do this later.
Okay, thank you, Anchor.
Yep, thanks for the question. All right, so I'm able to get this work. Let me get my toppings going, and I want to use local storage. I haven't forgotten of our main objective here. So let's go to my script file. Let's actually add some logic here. So this is where I've talked about this before, and hopefully you guys understand what's going on. There's a magic parameter that's being passed to my event handler. I am not passing it. That's like the browser's doing the work for me. But just know that you're going to get an event object that's going to have a wealth of information for you to use in this event handler. All right, so I'm going to call that event. Again, I can name that whatever I want. I can name it donuts. I don't want to mix donuts and pizza, so let's call it E for short form. All right, so that's just a parameter that I'm going to get. And now I could use that. So we do E dot, actually, I don't know. So let's get a debug session going quickly. Let's just do console dot log E, should take care of it, I think. So let's refresh, click the button, say green olives. So interesting enough, not interesting really, but I don't like black olives, I like green olives on pizza. I actually just don't like black olives in general. I don't know why. All right, so notice we got a pointer event. That's what happened when I click this. We can investigate what's in it. Again, there's so much in here, half of which I don't even know what it is. But the thing I care about is something called target. That's telling me what button was clicked. I guess in this case, I don't even need the ID, so I'm kind of going down the wrong path here. But if I did need to know which button was clicked, let's say this event handler was handling multiple buttons, this one can tell me specifically which button got clicked. In this case, it's not important to me, so that's just a moot point. But in this case, I want to, let input topping equals documents dot get element by ID. I want to get the value from there. So what was the name of it? I remember it was input toppings, plural, singular. I went with singular, which would make sense. So input topping, we get the elements. Again, always get to check to make sure that you have something. Like if it's null, you don't want your application to kind of freak out. So this is going to check it's not null. I actually want to do something. Get rid of this console log. All right, in here, I want to grab the value for it. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to create extra variables just for fun. Let topping equals input topping.value. Again, remember, we don't want to, this is an element. It's not a string. It's not data that we want directly. Input.value is how we actually access the value that the user typed in. So we get a string back from that. And then given the topping, we want to add it to our list. So we're going to do let list toppings equals documents.getElements.at. Name of that was list toppings, hopefully. If that is list toppings, we want to add it to the list. So we'll do list toppings, append child. We're going to add something to it. Let's call on, who's out there? Duncan. Duncan, can you help me? Can you figure out what I need to add here still? So I want to eventually append a child. Can you tell me what I need to do maybe on line 16 and 17 and right here? What step am I missing here? So just to walk you through my code, because I know I've been going kind of quickly. What I've done so far is basically looked for the input, which is this thing over here. This is the input. I want to grab the value that the user typed. So if they typed, garbage in there, we'll get garbage back. That's what input topping that value should give me back whatever they typed. Then I'm going to get the list. So I have this list item that's not visible here, but it's in my HTML code, I promise. I have a list here that's list output toppings. I need to name that correctly. How can I actually show the user what they added as a topping? All right, so I grab that actual list element. That's what this is. So let me call that LM. Any thoughts, or have I kind of lost you with my code here?
Sorry, I'm just really slow at this. I'm just thinking it through.
No need to apologize at all. Take your time.
I'm drawing a blank right now. I don't want to start.
That's fine. That's totally fine. So in this case, we need to create a new element. This element's going to be added to our page. So I do let list item topping, I'll call it. We do document.create element, and the type of element I want to create. This is only the type, no attributes in it. So in this case, I want to create a list item, right? Because that's what we use with our list, unordered list or ordered list. So I create a list element. Then for that list element, list element topping, I want the inner HTML to be the topping that the user entered. And then I need to append the list item topping. Let's call this new, let's call it new item. I'm getting too descriptive here. All right, so new item will be a new element that we create. We're going to update the inner HTML. Again, that's the content of this element. And then finally, we want to add it to our list. So let's add some comments just to make sure we know what we're doing. So create new element, then update content. And then finally, we want to add new item to our list. Again, this last part, very easy to forget in the sense that you're like, hey, I created a new element, I'm good to go. Well, the element is just, again, floating out in space. It has no knowledge of your HTML document. This append child is basically taking an existing item on your document and then adding a child to it. So that's going to actually link it to your page, because you already have something on your page. Append child is going to be like, all right, add it, as a child to this existing item. So now if I do it this way, let's see if this works. Or if I create something green olives, didn't work. Let's take a look. New list toppings, child. So we create the element, update inner HTML, list topping. Oh, did I rename stuff? Yeah, I did. Renaming. All right, so I want to append to list topping. Yeah, I need to work on my naming, but let's try that again. Let's go with cheese as a topping. Any other naming things that I want here? So
I think your list item topping and after the append child.
Oh, thank you. Yep, I should just be better about naming. All right, thank you very much. Hopefully that was the thing that was missing. Cool, that was what I was missing. So now I could add green olives because I like that salty mix in there. Green olives. All right, so now we're able to add items here. So finally, we're getting to local storage after all that example. So local storage, what if I, refresh this page? Well, I lost all my toppings I just added. If we want to preserve that between, refreshes, well, local storage is one option. And then we also have session storage. You can also use cookies. Local storage is what we're going to focus on, but session storage works the same way, just has a different lifespan. All right, so let's add, green olives. So this is where local storage comes into play. When we add a new topping, we want to add a new element to the HTML page, but we also want to keep track of the data that the user gave us. So to do this, let's say they give us topping. We're going to, let's say, add.
Ankur, I have a question.
Go for it.
This is kind of a weird thing. When you say append child, how do you know what you're referencing? Like, what's the parent element here? How do you know?
Well, the parent element's the list, because I got the list from the document. Right, so this is an unordered list that I kind of created here. So this is what I'm grabbing. I'm adding children right here. So children get appended here. So I grab this element, I call append child on it. It's going to nest it within that list right here and keep adding it to the very end.
Okay, weird question. If I just added a section for whatever reason underneath an unordered list, would that still be append child?
Sorry, you said a section. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, like if I created the element that I create, let's say I create like a paragraph or a section underneath unordered list, is that still append child?
As in you want to put a paragraph within this list?
Yeah, for whatever reason.
Let's try it. I'm not sure if that will break, but instead of creating a list element, let's create a paragraph. So we're going to nest a paragraph in our, all right, let's try that quickly, but I want to get to local storage. So onions, I also like onions, add. All right, so that adds a paragraph that's not a list item. Notice the bullet is missing. So yeah, I guess you're able to, add paragraphs in the list. That's good to know. But again, the bullets aren't there because this is not a list item. But yeah, you could append pretty much any type, I think here. I could put images here too. Let's say I was able to grab onions as images off the web. I could probably add a list of images. So that'd be cool too. All right, let's get to local storage. So, okay, so we were able to add the item. Let's switch back to list item just because. Let's add to local storage. So again, local storage is a predefined object. Again, it's called local storage, capital S. We want to call set item, and this is going to be a key value pair. So hopefully everyone understands the idea of key and values. Key is how you access something, how you set something and retrieve it. So key is going to be your magic bullet here. So let's define a key up here. The reason I'm doing this is because I know I'm going to set something, and also get something using the same key. To be better about it, I want to create a variable that has my key stored in it so that I could reference it multiple times. I don't want to hard code it in case I change one instance. Again, changing it to the second place would be something I might forget. So let's say toppings key. We'll call that toppings. And then I'll use this key value, which is just a string. Again, local storage just deals with strings. Toppings key. And then I want, let's say, a toppings array. So const toppings data. All right, so we're going to start with empty list. Toppings data. It's going to be a list or an array, I guess, in this sense. So what I want to do is toppings data. I want to push a new topping. And I want to do JSON.stringify toppings data. Just to review here. So local storage only deals with strings. Toppings data is an array. In order to store an array properly, you want to stringify it, which basically is a string representation of a JavaScript object. That's what JSON actually stands for, JavaScript Object Notation. So here I'm going to stringify it so that local storage is only dealing with strings. I'm storing what it expects, and then I need to get it. So let's actually test this out. Let's make sure local storage is actually storing stuff. So if I do onions, add, let's inspect local storage. I'm going to do Command Option I on my Mac. I'm going to go over to Application, the Application tab right here. Notice there's local storage, also session storage if I were using it, but I'm not. So in my local storage, notice I have something called toppings, and then I have a value of onions. That is what I would expect. What if I add something else? will this overwrite what I have? B, will it append to it? 3, will it crash or do something weird? Let's add some green olives. Olives. All right, cool. So it's appending to that list. That's what I want, right? I want to keep track of everything that I've added. Now, if I refresh the page, well, my local storage still has that data, but notice that my page no longer has it because we haven't retrieved the items out of local storage. So this is something I probably want to do an on load. So I'll do something like, let's check local storage when we load our page. Check local storage. So I'll do what I want to do here. Let's do stored data equals local storage dot get item. What do we have out there? Lily Teeter, since you asked about local storage, maybe can I ask you, how do I get my data back here? So I want to get that data that was stored in local storage. How do I get it here? Any ideas?
Do you have to put like pass the variable it was saved to?
Variable is saved to. So you're saying toppings data?
Yeah.
Nope. Good guess, but that's what we're eventually want. That's what's storing our data in our application. So local storage has the string version of it. We eventually want to get it into toppings data, but we need to access it. How do we access something from local storage? So what do we do when we saved it? When we saved it, we pass it 2 values, right? We pass it a key and the data we want to store. So when we want to get it back, we need to use that key again. So I called it toppings key. So we're just going to access it via that key. So we do toppings key. This is saying, all right, I'm giving you a key. Give me back the value or the data that you stored with that key. Right? So this should get us this back. However, there's one thing I'm missing here. Michael Cheech, do you know what I'm missing here?
Yeah, I think you need to actually like reference the let's see, stored data equals local storage dot get item. All right. Yeah, maybe you need to grab like and that should give, I don't know. Yeah, let's console log that and take a look at it because I'm kind of that should give us the entire, oh, we got to destringify it, I guess, or
yes, correct. Yeah, I guess I should have gone through the example, but you're correct. We're going to need to unstringify it, or also that's the parse method. So this will do the reverse of what we did before. It's going to take a string notation and convert it back to a JavaScript object. So in this case, whatever string representation was, it's going to parse it and should give us back an array. And the reason it gives us back an array is because that's what we stored it as, right? We stringified an array. So parse does the opposite. Parse is going to say, all right, I'm going to try to guess it, determine what this is, and it should properly give us back an array. The reason we want it to be an array is because we need to iterate over it and reinsert it here. So I'm going to do some quick coding here because we're running close to noon, but I'm going to break this up into 2 functions. I'm going to call one function add elements, add topping elements, and then that'll be a function. And you'll hopefully see why I'm doing this. I'm going to break apart this part, which is adding an element to the page. I'm going to need all this stuff also. Quickly copy and paste. Don't forget my closing bracket. All right, so this function, again, single responsibility principle. Definitely want to have multiple functions for each action you're doing. So this function is just adding it to the page. It's not dealing with local storage. To add it to local storage, I'm going to create a new function and call const add topping to local storage. Probably not the best. Let's just say add to storage. Anyone want to take a guess as why I'm bothering doing this aside from better coding design?
Absolutely, I can use that same exact code whenever you load the page and you have something in storage. You can just use that to add the toppings to storage.
Yep. So now my add topping will simply be call those 2 functions. So add topping elements, and I want to add topping storage. Full disclosure, I probably want to check to make sure that the topping was actually added successfully before adding it to storage. I'm not going to go that far, but that's maybe return a let's go that far. say I'm not going to do it, and I do it. All right, so in this case, this function is going to return true and false if it successfully added the element. If it did, return true. If for whatever reason, like the input didn't exist or the list didn't exist, we're going to return false. The reason we want to do this is because we want to say let success equals, whatever this returns, assuming we get success, then we only then do we want to add it to local storage. All right, the reason I broke those two apart was because now when I'm loading my data here, I could do a for loop, let I equals 0, I less than stored data.len, I plus plus. Now I could just, for each element, so I need a topping also. Sorry, changing my design here. So let's return the topping if it got added, otherwise return null. So in that case, when I have a topping here, I should be able to pass it to my storage. All right, the reason I did this was now I have this function that I could reuse to only add my items here, right? Sorry, I am losing track of what I'm doing. In this case, I need to call on add toppings, so that is, oh, but we don't have to input. All right. So, okay, we're gonna need to break this apart even more. So we want to grab the topping in my click here, right? Because that is when they have the input, we get the topping from the control itself. That's what topping is gonna be. And then in that case, we want to do this stuff. Everyone kind of following along? I know I'm kind of throwing around code here, but we have two sources where we might get toppings from. One might be from the user when they type it in and click that button. The second would be from local storage, which has the topping data. So in that case, we want to grab the topping from the input. And then this can go back to success. And if that's successfully added, then we do that. So change this back to true and false. True, false. Okay, so this is one thing we want to do. But for our loading data case, we just want to call both of these. So let success. I want to add the elements for topping and add the storage. So I guess add topping to storage can be part of this function, but since I've broken them apart, I'll keep them apart. Topping. Oh, I see. That is why I needed it. So sorry. Okay, so let me review because I kind of talked a storm up there. The reason I broke that apart was for this main purpose. When I'm loading from local storage, only thing I want to do is add the elements to the page. I don't want to add back to local storage because I'm reading from local storage, right? That's going to be kind of just like I'm reading from local storage and re-adding it. Like that doesn't make sense. So when the user clicks a button, we need three things to do. We need to grab the topping data that they entered. We want to add the element to the page and add the data to local storage. However, when we're loading from local storage, the only thing we want to do is add the elements to the page. We don't need to grab the value because we have the value from data. We don't need to store local storage because we are reading from local storage. Sean, sorry, I saw you hit facepalm there. I don't know if that was from what I was saying or something else. Okay, no, okay, sorry, that was unrelated. But now, if I refresh and hopefully did everything correctly, refresh here, doesn't work. Stored data.
I think I see something, if you don't mind, on line 9, you're calling parse on your key, but I think you should just get item key and then parse stored data.
Excellent, excellent, excellent paired programming help there. Yep, I want to parse what I get back. I don't want to parse the key. That is my goof. I want to get the value via the key. This gives me a string, so everything I've highlighted gives me a string back. JSON.parse will convert it back to an array. Thank you so much. Refresh. Still doesn't work. Stored data.length. Let's see what stored data looks like. Stored data. Illegal return statement. That's not good. Oh, I have some syntax error here. Looks like this return All right. Bad coding. All right, there we go. We got our object back. If we refresh. Okay. All right, so we're getting our data here. We got onions and green olives. That looks correct. I bet it's toppings. Yeah, we don't have anything called topping. That is quite obvious. We have stored data at index I is what we want. Okay, refresh my page, fingers crossed. Topping is not defined. Where's topping? This says script 42. So 42, topping. Topping is an input now. Will that do it? There we go. All right. Some bad coding there. Hopefully I'm not a good example for that, but eventually we're getting it to work. So just to review what we did here, when the user clicks something, so let's add a topping. Let's say, I don't know, green peppers. I don't want green peppers. Let's go with ham. All right, so we add ham. When we click the add button, that triggered this event handler on add topping, right? That is what we mapped for the button. So when that happens, we grab the input, we grab the value from it. Then we add the topping element, which is basically adding a list item to our list, which is done with this function right here. So again, we create a new element, add the topping as the inner HTML, and then append the child to the parent list. Also, we add an item to local storage because the user typed something, we want to save that information. So that's what this function is doing here. And just take a look at that. Pretty simple. We update our internal data, just keep that in sync, and then we also update local storage. Again, always want to keep your local data and local storage kind of in sync. You could get away with not updating your local item and just always updating local storage, but then you're gonna always have to read from local storage anytime you want to do anything with its data, right? So again, I don't need to have this. I could kind of recombine it each time, right? Like a lazy way to do it would be to so again, this is bad practice, I would say, but can work. In this case, I could load from local storage, append, store data, append, or push topping. All right, so now I can just read from local storage, add topping, and restringify it, but that's inefficient. Reading from local storage is not super quick, and this parsing has some overhead, so it's better to just keep internal data here. You guys with me? I know it's time for a break. We're almost at lunch. All right, so let's do peppers. Save, refresh, save, refresh. Notice it still works. Oh, it doesn't work. Peppers, add. So we push the top. Oh, let me top in here. That should take care of it. So if I do peppers, add, refresh. All right. Oh, I overwrote it. That's not good. I see. I never reassigned to that. So this is what I want to do. If stored data. So I overwrote my previous data. So I need to reassign to it. So if stored data, I want toppings data to equal stored data. I want to check to make sure I have something that's not null. If I don't have anything stored in local storage, this would be a null value, so I can't iterate over it, right? This won't give me anything back from it. So I always want to make sure I actually have something in local storage. There's no guarantee it's going to exist. So always double check to make sure you're getting something back because it might not exist. Something exists, I want to add the elements and update my internal data. The reason I need to do this so that I don't overwrite all my other toppings that existed before. Let's try this one more time. So I have peppers, I have cheese, and great, it broke again. Okay, while I'm trying to debug this, any other questions about local storage or HTML? So again, the key of local storage, simply create a key, store your data, make sure you stringify it if it's an array or a dictionary. Make sure you stringify it to store it in local storage. And when you get it out of local storage, make sure you parse it, the actual value you get back using the key. So local storage, I get item, pass it the key where I stored it, and then get back the data. Again, you can have multiple keys and values that you store in local storage.
Hey, Ankur, what's the easiest way to link to another local page that you have? Is it using the anchor?
Yeah, let's go through that because that is part of your assessment. So let's create a new page, new.html. So again, we haven't really done this, but again, nothing too magical. So if I go to my new page, create a base HTML base. Let's say this is my new page. Let's say just h1 my new page. All right, so the question was, how do you link to a new page? If I go to my index.html, let's add it at the very bottom. Let's say it's going to be like a footer. And footer, just a glorified div. Don't get confused by this. It's another div, just a specific name for it. Let's add a link. So let's say view our new page. And yes, we use the anchor tag and href, and you just link to your local file just as you would find it on your local machine. So in this case, new is sitting right next to my index.html. So I just specify new.html and say new page, or whatever I want to call it. So again, you're going to be creating multiple pages for your assessment. So kind of just understand how to have some navigation. I will tell you, part of your grade will be, do you have proper navigation? Is it easy for me or any user to get from one page to another, or do I have to update the URL, right? Usually, you just shouldn't be typing in URLs to kind of navigate your web page, right? You should have useful links, so make sure you have some navigation between your pages. So if I look at this, I got a link down here. If I click on it, notice I got to my new page. Yep, thanks for asking that, because that is something you guys want to go through. All right, I'm not going to bother debugging this. We had it working at some point. I probably screwed something up with adding all these functions here. So success. Yeah. All right, so we are approaching noon. I'm going to put up the assessment 3 in the next 5 minutes. You guys will have the entire afternoon and the entire weekend to work on it. We're going to have stand on at 4:30. This doesn't need to be recorded.